Hi, my name is Brenda Joy Lem, and I'm a Toronto-based artist born and raised in Toronto. So the exhibition here at the Richmond Art Gallery is titled Homage to the Heart, and the title really came at the very end. About a month before the show, the curator came and she looked at the prints to see, what I'd been working on, but I hadn't tied it all together yet in terms of the title for myself, and it was very strange. After she came, I had a dream that night, and it just I realized, okay, I'm going to do the table, and all these last little bits came together. But I think often when you do art, you don't really know what's happening inside, and so I realized how much for me it was really about a journey of the heart and learning to keep the heart open even when things seem painful or even just uncomfortable or disagreeable, right? So the stories come from both my father and my aunt. Actually my oldest aunt, because there's two aunts, and my oldest aunt really was closer in age to my father, and they really were there during the beginning days of the laundry and growing up during having to do that physical work. When they would tell me the stories, I really just felt like I could feel their pain and that they had carried these stories for a long time. When I was growing up, my mother would always say, don't ask your father about his childhood, it's too painful. And so it's really only since my dad, maybe he was about 70, that I started to first show some old photos to him, and I realized he would talk if I showed him old photos. So my first printmaking project, I guess it would be '94, was from bringing out those first photos and doing banners, which actually they showed here at the Richmond Art Gallery, that show. And then when I pulled out these other photos from the Boakley collection, it was just like new imagery, but from that time period, it was also another way to kind of loosen his tongue. And my aunt, her personality is totally different from my dad's. Like my dad, he really carries, a lot of the hardship and pain, and you can feel it with him. With my aunt, she was very carefree and just really always seemed to know how to enjoy life. And we were kids, my parents, didn't have birthday parties or buy us gifts and stuff, but my aunt, if we visited her, like she'd buy jelly donuts and take us to fun places, and Christmas she'd host like a big dinner in a restaurant and I'll bring presents for the kids, and so it was always very celebratory to be with my aunt. And so it was surprising to have her tell these stories, because she would always say, these things didn't affect her. She just, my dad, he did the best with what he could. I don't hold any grudges. I don't know why your father's so sensitive about these things. But then in the last year of her life, when she was telling me these stories, I think it somehow did cross another boundary for her, because I remember one night she phoned me and she goes, I don't know why, after talking to you this afternoon, I just cried all night. She goes, I guess it was therapeutic for me. Some of the stories are quite difficult or painful, and you wonder if they're true, and you kind of maybe wish they weren't true. And so for me, it was really a process of learning to live with these stories and just accept them for what they are. There's a lot of metaphors for the heart in the show. So there's a series of stories from my dad and my aunts that just use the heart the hands as a symbol for the heart. So you have like an open heart, the clenched heart, and, defended heart. And then there's this open space where really the heart is meant to be just the space between your hands. The sound in the installation in the show uses the sound of the taiko drum as a heartbeat, and traditionally in Japan, they have always referred to the taiko beat as a heartbeat. It's supposed to be like the mother's heartbeat, and it will put a crying baby to sleep, and that kind of old beliefs about the taiko drum. I guess the other transformative aspect was that I tried to use the same element so that there's a connection between these different time periods. So in the projected videos, the rock that my daughter is holding is the same rock that is in the print about the rock that smashes a window, or the rock that symbolizes a heart. So it's sort of like the past, the present, and then the next generation. And same with the tree. There's a tree that's referred to in some of the prints, and then my daughter climbs the same tree in the video. And the idea is that for my daughter, a tree can just be a tree and a rock can just be a rock. So the prints I tend to have in general, a collage kind of approach, I think, to all my artwork. So, you know, I mixed media and I mixed formats and things like that. And the prints use both photos and sometimes a bit of drawn imagery and text. And I think part of me really loves text. I like the look of text, even like different fonts and things like that. But also, I think for me, words also have, you know, a lot of meaning. And so I really like to use words also with imagery. Maybe I feel that they can give me a greater vocabulary sometimes than my limited ability to use visual imagery. I like to think that maybe my grandmother or my great-grandmother can speak to my daughter, you know, that there's a way that they can connect through, you know, our shared history, but also that it can be transformed. So all these experiences, we don't have to just focus on, like, I just think like it's like your resume, right? Like, if I was hiring somebody, I wouldn't hire somebody just based on all their achievements. I would want to know what their failures were, what were the things that really made them grow, and how do you handle those things, right? And so I think those are the important stories. And so I think we live in a culture where it's kind of like we want to emphasize always that, you know, the great marks or the achievements, but I really feel like those bare bones stories of, you know, the hardships really give us strength. Like, if you know your great uncle, you know, survived a huge disaster, or you know, the family went bankrupt and they worked their way out, like, it just lets you know that, you know, you can do that too. So when you have, it actually helps you when you have to face hardship to know that, you know, others have managed, right? Whereas if everything's always beautiful, you don't feel like you have the tools to do that. It's much more overwhelming. I always enjoyed making art from a very young age, and I think I never grew up thinking I would be an artist, so I didn't really have, I guess, big romantic ideas of what an artist was or anything. I think it kind of grew very organically for me. I used to do a lot of collages, and I worked with cutting out paper packaging, like from Chinese food labels and things like that. And I think it was a way to kind of affirm my identity, because I grew up in a very middle-class white suburb of Toronto, and I came from a working-class Chinese family. And I think probably my father, because he felt it strongly, he probably also accentuated it for me. Like, he would always say, you know, all these guys with their white shirts and their briefcases, they think they're better than me, and I have my blue working, you know, outfit and my little lunch pail. But he goes, you know, they might have a sandwich in their briefcase, I have a sandwich in my lunch pail, what's the difference, right? So I think as he talked about, you know, class stuff and race stuff a lot when I was growing up, it became quite accentuated for me. I kind of started to meet people that were involved in the Asian American arts movement, and so my first husband that I met, he really encouraged me to show my collages, and so it was the first time I really ever considered that I could actually show my artwork. And it was really a fascinating time for me, because through my first husband, I traveled a lot in Asian America, like through San Francisco, New York, all these places, and just to be exposed to the artwork of other Asian Americans, it really made a context where my art made sense. Like, if I look through the European history books, my stuff maybe didn't really look as much like art then. I mean, I think now, you know, there's more, you know, maybe even since the 60s, more of a pop sensibility of different things, but, you know, even just to use an Asian face was still, there's just not a lot of artwork at that time. And even working at Open Studio, when I first started working there, they had a print salesperson who told me if I had Asian faces, he wouldn't be able to sell my work. So it felt like, you know, at the time, it became very political for me to try to make work to affirm the history of Asian Canadians in the Americas, and also just for my parents. I kind of inherited some of the stigma that they grew up with, and so I really felt a strong need to affirm a lot of their life experiences. So this exhibit really has allowed me that opportunity. I didn't know that it was going to. It came about through an invitation from Linda Jansma, at the Robert McLaughlin Gallery in Oshawa to do a whole new exhibition of a new body of work for her. And the only thing, kind of stipulation, was that I work with the Bulkley collection, which is an archival photo collection from historic Oshawa. And it was really a really nice coming together for me, I guess, of historic photos, and then my family stories just came together to make that history come alive for me, to understand a bit more like what the town was like where my dad grew up and what the times were like. It really was strong. I had a really strong feeling though when I looked through all the work and saw, you know, hundreds and hundreds of photos, but maybe 2 that had a Chinese face in it. And so in a way, to be able to take these photos and put the narrative of, you know, a Chinese Canadian family on it that, you know, had lived in that town for 100 years or something felt very like an important thing for me, to just to allow them to have a presence in history.